All right, welcome to the November 14th, 2023 Aries Cloud Agent Python Users Group Community Meeting. Lots on the agenda, status updates on a pile of things, and I've realized I don't even have all of the things we need to talk about. Status, load generator, status, the code with us on and on creds in W3C, and I can give updates or the people involved format. So a bunch of status updates. If as we have time, I want to demo the Traction Sandbox, which is a new utility available for playing with ACA-Pug and on creds, and we're starting to make that better known, and it's proving really powerful, so I wanted to share that. And then as time goes, we can do PR issues and updates, one of which is please act, which I wanted to go over if we can. So we are recording the call. A reminder, this is a Linux Foundation and Hyperledger Foundation community meeting. So the Linux Foundation antitrust policy is in effect. The Hyperledger Code of Conduct is in effect. We'll start with welcome, introduction, and any announcements people have. So welcome to all. Does anyone want to introduce themselves that's new to the call and wants to say what they're doing in the community? Any other announcements that people want to make before at this point that the community should know about? Patrick.
Yeah, just two quick things, sort of project I'm going to be looking at. So tomorrow I have a meeting with Brian from Digital Bazaar, and we're going to investigate adding a DIDCOM exchange service to the VC Playground, and we're considering using ACA-Pug as the agent for this. So this should be interesting. Cool. And I also had a conversation with someone I met at IW last week. He'll also be part of the call tomorrow, and we're investigating how to have some sort of browser wallet that would tap in ACA-Pug to be able to receive a Chappy hook and send that credential in a Aries wallet. So we're going to look at ACA-Pug, and we're also considering maybe the VCX as an alternative. So.
Okay. Might want to add that last one. I won't have time to put that in. Feel free to add your name to the attendees. That's that. Okay, release. Let's get to the agenda. Release 0.11 status. We're down to 2 PRs that I believe are now passing the tests, I think, and that we want to merge in. We may go without that one. Let me quickly jump to ACA-Pug, the pull request, and the 0.11. So one of them is passing tests, one is not. So definitely let's get the completion of the review on 2550. I don't know if anyone on the call has status on 2558 and where we are with that. Okay. So we've got those two, and with that we would complete 0.11.0 status, or 0.11, and we would publish a RC1, and then finally publish 0.11.0, the final. Reminder that there'll be no dash in the RC1, so it'll be 0.11.0 RC1. So that's a change because of to align with the proper handling of SEMVer guidance. There shouldn't be a dash in there, and with the new poetry change we put in, it actually names the release differently. So we had a bit of a scramble with the last release, but that'll be the protocol going forward. no dash. Not that that's that important. We will also tag a 011.x branch, and from then on, we will be adding patch updates to the 0.11.0. And then we will be continuing on with development of what I'm thinking is likely the 1.0.0 release, which will be the AnonCreds ledger agnostic and whatever else comes along in that time frame. So that's the release update flow. Any questions or comments on that? Emiliano, I saw you joined. Perhaps you missed. I was asking about the RevReg entry PR that's still failing tests. Do you have any sort of status update on that one, or we're still waiting on?
No, I need to check with Shanjot. I talked to him last week. He seemed to have a handle on it, but he apparently didn't finish fixing it. Okay.
And okay. So we'll take a look at that one. Has Ian joined us? He said he was going to be late.
I'm here.
Is here. Good. Status update on AnonCreds RS branch into main.
Right. So I've created another branch. I've been manually pulling across the code from the AnonCreds RS. So I've pulled across the code from all the net new code, and I'm starting to pull across the integration bits. It's right now, all the unit tests are passing. I've got the endpoints hooked up for the schema and cred def creation, and there's an integration test that Daniel Bloom and his team had written that is now working up to the point of creating the schema and cred def. And next two tasks, I'm going to take a look at the unit test coverage on the new AnonCreds code and just figure out what net new unit tests we need to write, and also start looking at how to integrate the issuing credentials and requesting proofs using the new AnonCreds package. And all the new code is being added in parallel with the existing ASCAR and Indie SDK. So I've added a new wallet type ASCAR-AnonCreds for when you want to use the new ASCAR AnonCreds stuff. That's it.
Okay. And so the strategy we're now following is to do a first pass where it is entirely parallel to the existing functionality. And that may be where we stop, or we may in future sort of adjust the existing functionality to point to the AnonCreds. But that's currently the approach, and as noted, the wallet type ASCAR AnonCreds is the way to invoke the new, enable the new functionality. Still
the idea is that the idea is we want to add all the new code without touching any of the existing functionality, so it shouldn't have any impact on any existing deployments. Of that
exactly, and that way we can have everything on main. Okay. Jamie, to log into the wiki page, you have to have a Linux Foundation login, and then there's a login button. So that's how you do it. But you got to create a Linux Foundation identifier. Don't make any ironic comments about, login and all that stuff for this type of group. Okay. Other status updates, load generator. Kim, I noticed you were there. Do you have any updates you want to provide, or just say it's moving along? Whatever you want to add.
It's moving along. We're working on migrating to ASCAR for the load agent. And that's what we need to do.
All right. BC Gov has begun to deploy the load generator, got some success at the end of the week to have something running locally. And so we'll start playing with it. Yeah. All right. The other status update is on the W3C and on-creds in W3C VC format. That project is underway. So that is a 3-part project as mentioned above here. The non-creds Rust updates were awarded to the DSR Corporation. Alexander is on the call, I noticed. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but things are going very well on that. The design is available. So anyone that wants to look at the design, there is a PR that provides details of the design with a number of questions that came up and were addressed in the last 2 non-creds calls. The Rust updates have actually a lot been completed, and so that's in place. And so it's actually, as of this morning, there was a question, is this ready for review? And the answer was it's ready for review. It's still being worked, so it's not completely final. It's still a draft PR, but reviews are definitely welcome, and we would love to have people taking a look at the non-creds Rust updates and what they consist of. Patrick.
I found I was going to ask which repo was the PR, but I just found it. So
yeah, it's the non-creds RS. Oops, why did that? Well, that didn't work.
There's a PR for wrappers
There
as
we
well.
are.
Is that going to be part of
Yes.
the first
Yeah.
bit? Or? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The wrappers were committed last night. So commits were added to the PR for the wrappers last night. So it's going extremely well. ACA-Pug changes were rewarded to What's Cooking Inc. I have not been in touch with them at all yet. And so we'll be doing that hopefully this week. I haven't, so looking for that contact. And then after that, Animo was the awardee for the AFJ changes and bifold. So they'll be working on that sometime soon. They can actually are pretty well able to do that. So any other comments anyone wants to make about the progress being made there? We're pretty excited about that enhancement. Okay. I wanted to do a demo now on, if I can figure out how to move I'll do it from this side. I have a fancy feature that I generally like in Mac OS that does auto raise, so that when I do things like scroll over something, it raises what's behind. But sometimes it's a little tough when you're trying to move a screen and you go just a little too far and it auto raises and stuff. But anyway, so the Traction Sandbox. So I think many of you are aware of Traction, but if not, Traction is a multi-tenant manager, if you will, layer. It's actually a series of plugins that sit on top of ACA-Pug. And so Traction allows you to manage multiple tenants within an ACA-Pug environment. And BC Gov has been building it out for some time now. And recently BC Gov posted what's called the Traction Sandbox. And I thought it was I've been using it for a bit. A number in our community are using it, and I thought it would be worth letting others see it so they can think about how, the biggest thing I'm looking for is how we can use this utility to help bring people up to speed quickly in the use of ACA-Pug and to bring up, to test out use cases, to experience what it's like. So Traction consists of, I would say, 3 parts. The first part is what's called the Innkeeper. The Innkeeper is the manager of tenants. So people can go to the Traction Sandbox site, or any Traction site that they have access to and can request a tenant. And then the Innkeeper is a user interface that allows the administrators of the Traction sandbox to decide whether they want to allow that request to go forward. And if they do approve it, creates a tenant within that environment. In the sandbox, the Innkeeper is an automated bot that automatically grants access to anyone that requests one. However, in the sandbox environment, every 2 weeks, everything is reset. So although you are always granted a tenant whenever you want it, the tenant will only last to the 1st and 15th of each month. And then the environment gets reset and you would have to request another Traction sandbox. So that's Innkeeper. The second is a UI that allows you to interact with it. And I'm going to give a demo of that as we go forward, but it allows a person that's getting used to how ACA-Pug works, how AnonCreds works, how Indy works, all of those pieces work via a UI. And so in theory, you could actually deploy an identity digital trust application just using this the Traction UI. We expect it to be used primarily by developers to learn about and experiment with, creating a schema, issuing schema, and so on. So that's the UI. And so the Traction sandbox is an ideal place to experiment with the UI. And then the third part is Traction exposes more or less the same API that ACA-Pug exposes, so that controllers' business logic can be written and use the tenant that you have within a Traction instance, including the authorization necessary to access the admin API. So basically allowing you to build a full application that uses a Traction instance. So at BC Gov, for example, we have this sandbox instance that we share, and then we have a dev, test, and prod instance that actual line of business applications at BC government might use, will use to bring up their applications. So they will integrate their line of business application. So for example, the business registry in British Columbia is now starting to issue business ownership credentials to the owners of sole proprietorships. So the code is the controller code, the business logic is built into the BC registry app, but they're using the API for their Traction tenant to be able to use, to be able to handle the digital trust parts of it, issuing credentials, for example. I have this, we have this credential workshop. And so this is linked in here that provides you an overview. This takes about 20 minutes to run, and I'm going to run through parts of it right now so you can see how it works. But basically, I'll just get started with it. So lab 1, getting a Traction instance and a mobile agent. So it talks about how to do that. I will log out of Traction. So this is the Traction landing spot, Traction sandbox tenant UI. I'm hoping we get a better URL for it, but for now, this long URL is it. If you have a tenant, you enter the credentials for that tenant here. If not, you create a request. And so I'm going to say SWC7 and my email address and submit. And what you will see is that I automatically was accepted, and the Innkeeper gave me a new tenant. So in the background there, a new tenant was created and so on. Now, in a more governed Traction environment, this would actually go to the Innkeeper UI, which would decide, do some human verification to decide who you are, what you're planning on doing, and then provide access. I think I will just, well, let's do it real. So this is the only time you get access to your wallet ID and wallet key. So you need to save these before you go away. So this is not shared anywhere else except here. So as a result, I need to save my new wallet ID, and I have to save my new wallet key. So I'm going to edit that, erase that, display that, and save that. And of course, this is recorded on a video, so now everyone can sort of see my wallet ID and wallet key, but given that it's just a transient environment, that doesn't really matter. So now I've got my wallet ID, wallet key, I'm back to the login. I can now use those same credentials that I was just given, and I sign in, and I have a brand new Traction environment. Next step is I want to become an issuer. So I go to my profile, and the tenant is automatically connected to bSovereign Test. So again, note that there is an endorser involved. So Traction knows about endorsers, automatically connects to an endorser. There's a deployment of an endorser for bSovereign Test and for all the other environments we get to. There are also other ledgers, read-only ledgers. There's one write ledger and multiple read-only ledgers, and you can select what ledgers a Traction instance can talk to, and then each tenant can select which ledger it actually is going to talk to. So I'm going to register a DID, and we got a 404, but the connection's active, so I think we're okay. Those who know Traction, am I okay? It looks like it. So yeah, I'm now an issuer. It did everything. I'm now an issuer, so I have a badge. I am connected and registered with this public DID on the bSovereign Test Network. And there's the details of the DID that I've got. So I'm now an issuer. Let's see, next step. Let's, for the fun of it, create a connection to a BC wallet. So I'm going to pop up my my wallet, and I'm logging in. I don't know if you can see that because it's behind the meeting chat, but I can see it. You can see it, I think. I'm going to make a single use connection, so I can submit that, scan it, and I've got a connection. So there we go. I've got a note there back that said SW7, which is my tenant, responded. So I've got an activated connection. And if I refresh this, whoops, go to my connections, I've now got my wallet connection created. Next, I want to configure a schema, create a schema. So I'm going to create a schema. I'm going to call it, what am I going to call it? Can't remember. I think that's what I want to call it. I'm going to call it 1.0. So I can create all these things. I've got my schema created, and I can create a schema. Register that. I've now got a schema on the ledger. I can now add a credential definition. I'll create a registry, a revocation registry with it, and create that. So all of these are going to are being endorsed. So there is an endorser. It's an auto endorser in this case. Its policy is to always endorse. And I'm writing things to the bSovereign network. So if you were to go to bSovereign Test, you would see these objects landing and arriving. at this point, I can issue a credential. So I can use the Stephen College. I can choose to send it to the wallet. I can then enter values. I'll make a future expiry date, 2026, 11/14. And I was born on, New Year's Day, 2001.
I didn't know you were younger than me.
Yeah, yeah. Surprising, really. So now if I go over here to my phone, I've got an offer. I can view my offer. It's got the data that's specified, and I can accept it, and my credential is on the way. And there we go. So now I've got SW7 as the issuer, Stephen College. I've got my credential. I can now go in. I think I can do this pretty quickly. So what the heck, let's try it. Let's create a presentation request. Happily, it was supposed to be called student ID, and I called it college degree, I believe. In the workshop, it makes sure you use the one. So all we're doing here is providing a sample to start from, and we use the sample that aligns with the workshop. So now I should be able to run that. Over here, I should, we can now see I've got a notification, I've got a view, and looks like it doesn't like it.
I don't know if the shema name is case sensitive, but you should try again with capital C and capital D.
All right, let's try it again. So I want to decline this one. And now I believe I can edit this one, or when I create a new one, thank you for noticing that. I knew I should have run through this before. Let's see what happens there. Oops.
The selected connection.
Oh, right. Want me to actually look at the screen as to why it's not working. New proof request. Oh, look at that. Thank you, Patrick. So now I've got my request and I've shared it. We've got an abandoned one, we've got an accepted one, and we can actually view the raw content and things like that to see the proof request come through. All of that is a whole lot easier than the demos we used to give of of what you can do on ACA-Pug in the demos. The demos are extremely powerful and useful, command line, but you're running Docker and you're doing all sorts of things. Here, we've got a deployment of the sandbox. You're just connecting to it and using it. So that's the idea behind Sandbox. As mentioned, anyone can use it, with the understanding that tomorrow, November 15th, it'll all be reset. And so anything you're doing within it would be gone. You are then welcome to create a new tenant within it and continue on with your work. So it teaches you any code you build based on that. You really want to be configuring it and keeping, a config file and so on. Patrick?
Two question, like, is Traction designed to be used for production? Let's say like someone would want to have their own instance and use it for production. Okay.
Yes.
And is it designed to be sort of customizable, like team wise or look wise, or is it sort of?
So at this point, no, we haven't put any effort into that. As far as I know, I don't think so. So, you know, the look and feel here is what the look and feel is. Just because we haven't. As Emiliano says, starting tomorrow, there would be a banner announcing reset dates on this. So there, and you know, obviously it's a BC Gov thing, so it's open source. So if anyone wants to add skinning to it and so on, we welcome that. Coordinate with the team building tenants and you know, do it in a way that works. But the idea of it is, you know, when you use it in a production environment, you're actually going to be using the API. So I just clicked onto the link for my tenant and my particular one. I can't use it directly until I authorize. So there's a few other features such as within there's API keys, so you can create API keys here. So the wallet key is really the secret for getting into the wallet. That's a one-time thing that should be maintained as a secret, not shared amongst the team even. What should be done is API keys created for anyone that you want to, you know, team members and so on that use it, and for applications that access the API itself. So you would authorize, and then you've got access to all of these ACA-Pug endpoints, plus some traction specific ones, such as the credential definition storage and things like that. So you basically, in writing a controller that would use a traction tenant, has full access to anything you would normally have with ACA-Pug. I wanted to highlight, we recently had someone create a use ACA-Pug, and so they created a Aries ACA-Pug controller and pushed that into here. So you've got a there's a video here you can take a look at, but Credivera here in Canada started using traction and published a very quick and dirty but really nice just the facts you know, web app that uses the traction interface to issue credentials. So there's setup done inside the traction UI, and then you can do the issuance and so on using the this simple web app that you've got. So that's another example of how we can start to build user interfaces, tutorials and things like that for the community to help ramp up quickly in the use of ACA-Pug. The pitch is, you know, traction. It's available. It's a good thing, but you don't have to use it. But what we can do as a community is build up simple tutorials like this one that I provide. I basically, you know, this whole tutorial that you're looking at is, I just ran through the entire thing. So, you know, in 20 minutes, people can really get a handle on how Aries in general works, how ACA-Pug works, how you can interact with a wallet. And then what I want to see added to that is, this is all the UI stuff, but what's next would be, you know, using the Swagger access and how you can start to build your own apps. So that's the demo that I wanted to give. Hopefully that was helpful to people and gives you another tool that you might be able to use. Warren.
That's very good, Stephen. I'm very impressed with that. Is there anything, say, in config or whatever that would allow you to, I don't know, download perhaps some configuration files and instructions on how to build your own deployment out of something that you constructed in Traction?
Okay, so there's two parts. So how you would deploy Traction such that you could use it in a production environment? Is that how you're asking it?
Yeah, or perhaps how to get a requisite environment running that, let's assume that you're not using any of the traction specific APIs, just the ACA-Pug ones, right?
Okay.
Then could you
So
get anyways.
Yeah, so the things we've published, BC Gov, and Emiliano, you might want to talk about this, is the Ansible scripts to enable deploying.
I think the two pieces are like, if you want to deploy the component and have it running, like just as a service, there are Helm charts that we're publishing and they can be referenced directly. It's really an ACA-Pug plugin plus a UI, so it's nothing extremely complicated. And for the same reason, if you are integrating a deployment with a traction instance, you are still using ACA-Pug endpoint. The only thing that changes is the initial call to fetch your tenant token that is to a slightly different endpoint, especially if you're using what we call the API key, which is another type of secret. But otherwise, you're calling API endpoints the same way.
Thank you.
The traction workshop that I referenced, the Google Doc, that's here. The Aries ACA-Pug controller example issuer, this link is here. So feel free to get them here and give them a try. What I would like to see is sort of a URL created and a MakeDoc site that contains information about this, so we can send people new to the community to take a look at that, and that could be their first arrival point at playing with ACA-Pug and playing with Aries, playing with the non-creds. All of those things become much easier with this type of utility available. So happy to share that with others, and happy to see if anyone wants to create a course around it. I'll probably update the courses I have on edX. This to me would be the ideal introductory one, which really gives a feel for, or introductory developer one, to get people to have a feel of it quickly and easily, and then sort of get lured into using the API and sort of building their own components relatively easily. So, all right, any other questions or comments? Excellent. Okay, and huge kudos to all the folks. I have been just a happy user of Traction, and so kudos to the BC Gov team that built this. This has been going for quite a while. Few of them are on the call today and doing really great work at making this really accessible and easy to use, and pretty crucial for BC Gov in that allows us to deploy things easily and quickly as we start to bring on more and more use cases. Okay, I wanted to give an update on Please ACK and where we've got to that. Alexander's on the call. He and I have been going back and forth in trying to figure out the best way to integrate this in. And it may be that we don't want to add it, but I wanted to sort of share to the community sort of where we are, and to get feedback from the community on what we ought to be doing. Likely this is something that should be talked at the broader Aries community, but I thought I would discuss it here since we're talking about adding it to ACA-Pug initially now. So the Please ACK protocol is a decorator, for those not aware. So in theory, an agent could take any DIDCOM message and stick a tilde please ACK with either on receipt or on income, on outcome, I mean, to any message. And the expectation is the other party would send one or two extra ACK messages above and beyond what the protocol that's being executed does. So examples that are in the please ACK RFC include at the end, on the last message when you issue a credential, the issuer could say please ACK on the issue and expect that the holder would send an ACK once it has complete, and it could be on receipt or on outcome, but assume it's on outcome, and the other party, the holder, would send an ACK at the end of receiving and processing the credential. And so the issuer would know absolutely that the holder received the credential and has processed it and is at the end of processing it. Another example would be adding a please ACK to a presentation message from the holder to the verifier, again on outcome, and expect that at the end of processing the verification, the issuer or the verifier would send an ACK to the holder saying, yep, got it, it's all good. If anything happened and it wasn't all good, one would expect a problem report would come out of it anyway, and presumably that's built into the protocol. There's a may here because the the other party may choose not to send it or may not support it. So those are two different use cases, which create interesting, have interesting ramifications. So an example of a may that I was thinking about as we were doing this was a basic message. In theory, a basic message sent, for those familiar with basic message is a single message protocol. You send a message and it's over. So the idea is with a basic message, you could put a received and a on outcome please ACK on a basic message and get to enable the 1 check mark, 2 check marks behavior of a messaging app, where the first check mark comes when you get the ACK from on receipt, and the second check mark comes when it's on outcome, that the processing of the message is complete. There are some complications there though, so we'll get to that in a moment. So that's the idea of it. Any questions, comments? People are familiar with that? Okay, tricky to implement. In theory, it is a decorator which can be put on absolutely any messages. It sounds like it would be relatively easy, but there is some rework for the on receipt form of the message. The on receipt says, send me an ACK as soon as you receive this message. So in theory, this could be sent in front of any protocol without updating or changing the protocol at all. And ACA-Pug would just send it back. But even that requires some rework and some questions. And the biggest question being, is the message a generic ACK or an adopted ACK? That's a big question. So a generic ACK is, there is an actual notification / ACK message type. But if you are sending this associated with another message that is a certain protocol, an adopted ACK is you are sending it with that protocol's name and then an ACK on it. So it's not clear exactly which this should be, and that would change. That would impact the controller, the notifications that would come to the which handler basically gets invoked when processing this. On outcome definitely requires per protocol updates at least. And in addition, probably would also, sorry, also requires logic for determining when an outcome, that general term outcome of a message, is known. So not only do you have to decide basically on state changes within a protocol when a requested ACK should be sent out. And it's relatively simple if the message is the last in the protocol, but it doesn't have to be the last. It could be anyone. And now you've got to decide when is it the outcome known such that an ACK should be sent. Further, if you do put it on the last message of a protocol, it also may alter the actual meaning of the protocol, and notably when the protocol is done. So when Alexander and I started talking about it, we sort of said, well, we'd like to have it that the ACK doesn't affect the protocol at all, but that may not be useful. So for example, basic message, well, as soon as you receive the message, if you're the receiver of a basic message, the protocol is done. And if, for example, the completion of the protocol means you fire a webhook to deliver it to the controller, and then you delete the protocol instance, well, it's gone. You can't send another message on that protocol. But if the semantic you want is that it be a read notification, which means some signal from the controller that the person has read it, well, that would mean extending the protocol lifetime to when the controller received the message and processed it, which again introduces another admin API step. It all sort of is much trickier than the RFC indicates. Likewise, on the present proof, it is pretty much the same thing. In present proof, the protocol is pretty much complete when the credential is cryptographically verified, when the non-creds process to verify the presentation has completed. But there are lots of cases where there is a business process after the cryptographic verification to decide if the credential actually satisfies the business need. So the example for that is an education credential where you don't predefine what institution, who the issuer is. You verify cryptographically that it's a valid issuer, but then you look up in a registry somewhere to decide if you trust the issuer, if you know that that college is a authorized issuer of a degree credential. Well, if you have to do that, that's a business process that would be executed by the controller outside of what ACA-Pug is doing. Again, a please act you would want at the end of this process, not at the end of the cryptographic verification. So a bunch of complications that come out of this. Further, requesting a please act would require the configuration of the admin API to be able to request such a thing, or for a or the ability to configure, oh, here are the places that I want to send a please act. So either you do it on a per call basis, or you configure something automatically to add it on automatically. And again, that gets interesting how you implement that. The net of that, I think, is we are just not ready as a community. There is not enough interest as a community to answer these questions. There's not enough understanding in the community to answer it, and probably not enough interest to go into it to answer these questions. And that's the point of this session, would be to ask, where people stand and where, from a business perspective, different organizations want to use Please Act. Patrick.
I can just share like my first gut observation. I think it reflects some of what you said, is that if there is this protocol and then some organization decides to make this, like, rely on this Please Act for some of their interaction, well, then they will not be able to interact with people that don't support it. So it will kind of put a burden on other implementation. I see as sort of a breaking change for some protocols in some way. Like if this is designed as its own protocol and then like a new issue credential protocol is defined that does make use of the Please Act, it wouldn't have this problem. But currently, especially with the state that even between different frameworks, some protocols are not quite comparable, I feel like this could potentially complicate things a little bit. But yeah, that's just my observation based on what was said here. I don't know about real use case enough to say more.
Yeah. Kim.
I'm a little concerned that we might be conflating two separate problems together here. The first problem being that we have a protocol that we don't know if we've delivered a message, much like UDP versus TCP. Where in the UDP world, you send a message and you don't know if it's been delivered or not. Whereas TCP, you send the message, it's delivered or the connection fails. And so the Please Act seems to be going on another issue. So the first issue is whether we've delivered a message or not. And Please Act is crossing into boundaries of the outcome of the message, basically, which is a protocol specific portion. And I think to do both would be problematic. And that the outcome of the message should be protocol specific, whereas the on receipt message seems like a reasonable approach to solve the UDP versus TCP flow. And I think to do both within a single protocol is a bad idea.
Okay. It's kind of funny that you say that so when AIP2 was being formulated, a decision was made we would include Please Act, but Please Act had some complications to it. And we decided to simplify it to be on receipt and have the option of on receipt, on outcome, or both. To try to do exactly what you said, which is, it's too complicated to do those other ones. But in fact, on outcome is also complicated for all the reasons we talked about. I think on receipt is doable if we declare the only thing we want to support is on receipt. Some rework could be needed. We've got to answer this one question about, is it a generic ACK or an adopted ACK? But that's relatively easy. The on outcome, I think, is way too complicated. So yeah, that could be a reasonable compromise, that we simply say on outcome is not requires changing each protocol to define how adding a Please Act to each message affects it. Colton.
Well, similar to the whole on outcome of a message, a great example of just adding that functionality into the protocol itself would be the trust ping protocol, where if you send a trust ping, you won't get a response if your response requested is false. But if response requested is true, then you will get that, essentially an ACK back out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be appropriate to add something like that to the individual protocols separate from Please Act.
Okay. Do you think, overall, do we think it would be worth adding an on receipt? Given that you pass messages through potentially multiple responders or mediators and relays, you really don't have a way of knowing when you send a message whether it actually arrives, basically due to the asynchronous nature. So an on receipt is, for exactly the reasons Kim said, it could be a useful feature.
Well, you could also combine on receipt, because like you mentioned the multiple mediators thing, you could combine please act with the forward messages, essentially creating a trace route.
Yes.
And it would tell you when each mediator receives the forward message.
Yeah. There is also a trace. I think it's the timing protocol that could be also used for that, but that's again, a slightly different use case. This please act would only be on, I mean, you can add a please act to a forward, so you would get it for that, but it would generally be used for end-to-end messages. But you're right, it could be used in the intermediate path as well. All right, thank you for that. We're out of time. Would love further conversation, perhaps on the Discord channel on this, to get other feedback. And I think I might take this to the broader community, Aries working group, and sort of pare this down to see, basically say that on outcome is out of scope for the simple please act protocol we have, but we might be able to use on receipt. What do people think? I also want to take it to the wallet makers and to see if they had this type of capability, how they would want it used. And with that, we are out of time. Thank you for your time and interest. Have a delightful day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.